I'm struggling with two aspects of Hubie Halloween, not necessarily the fault of the film. But the first thing is I'm struggling to place the target audience, and the second is that I'm struggling to work out whether or not I actually liked the film, because on the one hand I did, on the other hand I didn't. I will talk about that in a bit more detail, but there won't be any spoilers. So if you haven't seen Hubie Halloween and you feel like you want to, I'd say head to Netflix and check it out. You have nothing except 102 minutes of your life to lose. If you aren't aware of what this is the latest Happy Madison film, starring, of course, Adam Sandler, directed by Stephen Brill, and it's all about this guy called Hubie, or Hubert Dubois, who lives in Salem, and he loves living in Salem, and he also is very Halloween obsessed, which instantly was something I liked, because Halloween is my favourite day of the year, and I would happily live in Salem with all the decorations all year round. I think it would be magical. So instantly I loved the fact that this film oozed Halloween. Everywhere you looked, it was Halloween. There was decorations, there were people dressed up as Harley Quinn and all of these different villains and monsters, and there was a lot of autumnal colours, leaves on the ground. It really was a very beautiful film to look at. The visuals are spectacular, the colours are great, the costumes, well, the Halloween costumes are brilliant. It's great seeing everybody dressed up as witches and angels, and nobody was dressed as an angel, Amy, fairies, and all of these different kind of beings. But also the costumes, as in just the everyday clothes, the t-shirts, the jackets, the jeans, the colours were all so perfect and blended in together to create this beautiful autumn palette, and I loved it. So visually, very pleased with this film. In terms of the narrative, it's a bit odd. It's very hard to describe, actually. At the beginning, somebody escapes from a psychiatric hospital, and it seems like the whole film's going to be about his escape and any havoc that he will cause in Salem, and how Hubie will get caught up in that. And while that's kind of true, partly, it's more of a character study of Hubie. He reminds me of a 21st century Pee Wee Herman, a little bit, in his outlook. He's very juvenile in his outlook. He is, I guess, sometimes quite innocent in the way he looks at the world, and kids make fun of him for that, and there's a little bit of bullying going on there. Hubie as a character just isn't that great. Like, he has his moments, but there are some things about him that bug me. One of the things that bugged me was the voice. Sandler puts on this voice that's often used when comedians play characters who are adults with a more childlike emotional level, or when they're emotionally developed to a teenage age and no further. And actually, the top review on IMDb just now is titled, "Why the Voice?" So it seems I'm not the only person who has an issue with the voice that Sandler chose for Hubie. I feel like it was completely unnecessary and kind of just made a mockery out of him as a character before he had a chance to actually present his personality to us. He didn't need to have a silly voice for us to feel like he was emotionally underdeveloped, because that came across in his mannerisms and his personality and the way he interacted with people. The voice was completely unnecessary. The humour itself as well is a little bit of a problem, because on the one hand, it's very juvenile. Like, he falls off of his bike. It's something a little kid will laugh at. Kids are throwing things at him. Children will find this funny. But at the same time, there's a lot of adult humour, and it's not suitable for children. This is, IMDb says that this is a PG-13. I assume it would have a 12 release in the UK. So it's not for young children. It's not a child's Halloween film. But I feel like a lot of the humour is very immature. And some of it, as I said, is quite mature. So I think the contrast there doesn't work. It should either be one or the other. I mean, I feel like some of the mature humour the PG-13 audience would understand anyway, but it's just very mixed and it doesn't necessarily work. The cast is very good. Obviously, Sandler as Hubie is expressive, Without the voice, I'd say he gives a good performance. Kevin James is in it. Steve Buscemi, Rob Schneider, Maya Rudolph, Noah Schnapp pops up at one point. Ben Stiller is in it. And, Kenan of... Is that Kenan of Kenan and Kel? Yes, it is. Kenan Thompson of Kenan and Kel fame is in it. I didn't realise that was him at the time. So, as you can see, my opinions are very back and forth. And on the one hand, it was a visual delight. And the cast was good. On the other hand, there are problems with Sandler's performance insofar as his choice to use an accent to ridicule Hubie before we even get a chance to know Hubie. And it was unnecessary, and I personally don't think it worked very well. And also the narrative was chaotic and the style of comedy was up and down. So it sounds like I'm leaning towards disliking it, but I wouldn't say I disliked it. I just wouldn't say I liked it. I feel like I watched it, finished watching it, and just kind of went, meh. And unfortunately, that is the reception for a lot of Happy Madison films recently from a lot of people. But I think Sandler's at a point now in his life where he's had many successful films, he's made a lot of money, and he can do whatever he likes. And that's perfectly fine, and he's obviously very much allowed to do that. I do think the film is decent enough that it can be watched. It's not awful, it's not offensive. It's just... Hubie Halloween is just not great.